Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Night Live. I'm Shannon LaBriere. I am live and loving it tonight. We are going to have a great time of stretching and growing in our ability to thrive in the midst of change. Welcome. Thank you for jumping in. It's a delight to have you here. Let me pull the comments up. If you are new to Sunday Night Live, if you are new to watching us live, make sure that you give StreamYard permission to use your Facebook profile and name when you make comments. So when you introduce yourself, hint, hint, we will know who you are. We'll be able to see who you are. And just thanks for being here. Welcome, everybody. Loved. I've just loved this past week has been a roller coaster of learning for me. Talk about having to put my money where my mouth was when it comes to being resilient in the face of change, choosing in ways that would allow me to thrive and not shrivel. It's been a challenging week, but it's been a beautiful week. And I invite you to take a look at your week. And if it's been challenging, acknowledge that. Acknowledge that this was tough. I had a tough week. There was a lot of stuff going on. You tailor that message for you. Acknowledge what it was, but don't forget to also acknowledge the good that was in the midst of it because there always is. There always is good. The darker the night, the brighter the light. And that brings us to tonight's topic. We are going to talk about false choices. Sometimes we convince ourselves that we have to choose either one thing or another, and we totally take the possibility that we could have both things off the table. I want to talk about that tonight because if we are in the habit of accepting either or constantly, then we will lose some of the resilience that we have in being creative and how we deal with change, how we approach achieving our dreams and our goals. So, with that, let me give just a shout out to our sponsor, Thumb Roast Coffee. Thumb Roast Coffee is my favorite, and I get it in the mail. I actually order it on the website, and I get Thumb Roast Coffee sent to me direct to my home so that I never have to be without it. It's a huge convenience, and it's made even more special because when you order Thumb Roast Coffee at the website, thumbroastcoffee.com, you are able to use the coupon code THRIVE to get 15% off. THRIVE. You get 15% off of your online orders at thumbroastcoffee.com. I encourage you to do that. It is the coolest way to buy coffee. It is fresh. It is freshly roasted. It is clean. It is delicious. You will love it. I promise. And you'll love it even more when you get to use your Thrive discount and get 15% off at thumbroastcoffee.com. So do it. Do it. Do it. You will not be sorry. So, hi, Phil. It's good to see you, Philip. Have a good evening ahead of you, I hope. I can't remember if you're in the Eastern time zone or not, but maybe you're starting your night a little earlier. But welcome as we get ready to launch into tonight's topic about this idea of choosing either or. Not always the only options on the table, but we can just default to that. So let's see. Anything else that I need to say tonight before we get started? Oh, yes. Our Thrive Principle. Our Thrive Principle is, well, it's bring the honor, but because never mind, it's not going to be bring the honor. I'll talk about that in a little while. It is trust the process. There is a process at work. And when you are able to identify the process you want to use to approach your problems and using a resilient process, using a process that just doesn't give you two options, but opens up an abundance of options for you, you are going to have a process that you can trust to give you the best results that you can possibly get. So I encourage you to hashtag trust the process as we talk about this idea of choosing either or versus yes and. When I was in high school, we had a class with one of those edgy teachers. I don't know if you ever had one of those edgy teachers, but he was a guy who liked to encourage discussion. He wanted us to kind of think a little deeper to answer questions, to think a little deeper about solving problems. And so he tells us a scenario, and then he asks us to tell us what would be the good choice. So I should also probably add that this instructor had a certain bias toward having everything be relative. He did not believe in absolute truth, and he made that very clear as he was teaching us. We were in a history class, and he made it very clear he did not believe there was such a thing as absolute truth. And so the questions he put out to us that he wanted us to consider and think about, a lot of times those questions were sort of subtle traps. They were subtle traps. And this one in particular was a trap. And I'll share it with you. He told the story of a dad, a father who had children who were starving. And he had no money. He had no money. And the man stole a loaf of bread to feed his family. And he asked us, did that man do something wrong? Was it wrong for that man to steal that bread? Was it a sin for him to steal that bread? And as I'm looking around, I was about 17 years old. I'm looking around, listening to all the people talking around me, and they're like, well, I don't know. Was it a sin or was it not a sin? Yes or no? Yes or no? Did he do the right thing? Did he do the wrong thing? Right and wrong, yes and no. And those, I believe, are absolutes. Those things are out there. I mean, those are ideas that I can embrace in many cases. But he had not put all of the facts on the table. And so I raised my hand and I said, hold on a second. You've given us a scenario that isn't true. It wasn't true. He had other options. He didn't have to steal the bread. Yeah, but what if he had to steal the bread? But he didn't have to steal the bread. It was a false choice. I'm not going to choose if the man was right or wrong taking a loaf of bread to feed his family, because that's not the truth of it. He had other options. And sometimes we don't consider that we have other options. We back ourselves into a corner sometimes in how we think about the options we have in front of us. Sometimes we don't consider all of them because of our upbringing. Maybe those things were not actually shared with us, that we really saw things the way our family saw them, right? So we didn't know that we had options. So I'm here to tell you that you do. I'm here to tell you that you have options. You do not have to respond to challenges the same way your mom did or your dad did. You don't have to respond to challenges. This is going to blow your mind. You don't have to respond to challenges the way you did yesterday. You can choose. So, here are some ways that I've noticed help me to avoid the false choice trap. That trap that says if you're not, if you choose this, then you automatically have excluded that. You have to only pick one. That isn't usually the case, especially when we're the ones who are putting our options on the table. We're actually setting the table, we're making the buffet, and then we're telling ourselves what we can and cannot have, if that makes any sense. So I want you to build a buffet of options for yourself that allow you to move forward toward what you want to see happen in your life, the kind of person you want to be, that hashtag bring the honor, um, not atmosphere, quality to what you do, to everything you do. When we acknowledge that there are more options than what we maybe have been seeing, we open a whole world of opportunity and possibility. And that's something that I do as a coach. When I coach people, is to help them to see maybe there are more options than what you've considered. Maybe there's another option besides you quitting your job. Let's talk about it. I'm either going to quit my job or I'm going to go crazy. Well, maybe. But let's explore. Maybe those aren't the only two options. When you tap into, start paying attention to how you talk to yourself and those thoughts, I would love for you to notice how many times you actually say to yourself, you know what, she's either gonna shut up or I'm gonna smack her in the face, which is extreme, but come on, some of you have thought that, right? There are other options in between there, but we so often make it two choices and that's all. Now, there's a reason for that. There's actually a scientific reason for that. Our brains are sort of lazy, not in a bad way. They're not lazy for a bad reason, but our brains do everything they can to make it as easy as possible for us to make decisions. Because decision making takes a lot of energy, and our brain is highly efficient, or it wants to be. And so that habit of just seeing, you know what, I'm either going to have to quit my job or I'm going to have to move. Well, maybe, but that's the quickest, shortest cut that our brain can take to getting us to make a decision so that we don't have to put any more energy into it. Resist the urge to break everything into either or. So, as we explore this, I've got three tips to help you, to help me not get locked into this false choice, whether somebody else is presenting it to us or whether we are presenting it to ourselves. Okay, are you ready? Number one is this: assume that what you're saying, either or, assume that it could be possible to have both. Just assume that it's possible to have those things, those two things that you think you cannot have. When we assume that it's possible, instead of assuming that it's not, we unlock creativity in our brains. We unlock creativity in our brains. I reached a juncture in my career where I said to myself, back when I worked for the government agency that I was with for 31 years, I said to myself, I am either going to have to quit this job or I'm going to have to take it so that I can have days off, or I'm going to have to take a job that I hate in order to be able to be with my family. I worked afternoons. I wasn't able to be with my young children. And when my oldest son started school, I realized I wasn't seeing him because I would get him off to school and then I would go to work and I wouldn't see him again until the next morning. And that, for me as a parent, was unacceptable. It violated my values. I needed to be able to bring the honor. And so I thought my only choice was to quit or to have to take a position in that agency, in that organization, where I had to do something that I hated just to get days off that would allow me to see my family. Either or. But it really wasn't just either or. There were so many other options in between that I hadn't even explored. I didn't know what kind of opportunities were available to me if I were to say, take another test, If I were to talk to the head of another facility, as I started telling my leaders around me, I'm really concerned. I can't continue to work afternoons. I need to find something else. I was thinking that I was going to have to do a job that I dreaded just to get the hours I needed. And as I started sharing my story with people, I started hearing from these leaders, oh, well, if you wanted to go and work over in that department for a little while, all you have to do is write a letter and ask them if they'll let you. Really? I thought I was going to have these two choices and only these two choices: work that job that I didn't mind with bad hours, or take a job that I hated with the hours I wanted. I had to start believing that it would be possible for me to have a job that I liked with the hours I liked. Once those things were established, now I could start being creative. Oh, you know what? Maybe I could work for that department over there. Maybe I could work for that office over there. Maybe if I write some letters. But for a good amount of time, I was so frustrated, I couldn't see those creative options. And I'm just encouraging you, make sure that you are reminding yourself, you know what? The thing that I think is impossible might be possible. With God, all things are possible, right? The things that seem impossible might be possible. Give yourself time, not time, permission, I'd say. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. You can decide that fast. Give yourself permission to see it's possible. I can never be happy without fill in the blank. I either have to be miserable all my life, or I have to have that thing that I know I need. Give yourself permission to look at some of the other options. Maybe I can not get what that thing, but maybe I could be happy with something else. Believe it's possible. Once you say it's possible, you have the opportunity to now start finding things that maybe will fit the bill. But until you believe it's possible, you won't even look, because who wants to look for things that are impossible? If you don't think it's possible for you to be happy and do what you love, you're going to never look. Make sense? Okay. The second thing is this: refuse to accept somebody else's false choice. That teacher back when I was young who said, nope, you have to decide. Did the man, did the man do the wrong thing because he stole bread to feed his family? That's not even the right question. What were his options to feed his family? When we start exploring the options, it's never just an either or. There's always something else that we can do. There always is. We get to pick. We get to choose. Do not let somebody else give you an or else. There are some things other people can control. I've shared this story before on Sunday Night Live, but it really resonates with me, and maybe you haven't heard it. I was ill at this same job that I'm talking about. I was ill, I was sick, and I could not work late. They wanted me to stay and work an extra 2 hours of overtime, and I could not do it. I was sick. I could not do it. I felt so bad. And so I went up to my supervisor and I filled out the form they asked us to fill out. And I said, I have to go home. I'm sick. And she said, you can't go home. What do you mean I can't go home? You can't go home. We need you. You can't go home. And so I took my time card and I swiped myself out, punched out, and I said, you can't make me stay here. It's not a prison. I had options. I could leave. I wasn't handcuffed to the cancellation machine that was running mail. The doors were not locked to prevent me leaving. She was trying to make me think I had no options. When people try to make you think you have no options, you should suspect their motives. They are not looking out for yours. All right? I'm not going to say they're bad people, and that wasn't a bad manager. She really wasn't. But she wasn't looking out for my best interest because I had a fever and I was sick and I needed to go home. She was looking out for her best interest. When somebody's trying to present you a false choice where they are trying to convince you you have no options, they're not looking out for your best interests. If you are in a relationship where somebody is not allowing you freedom to choose, somebody's abusing you, and I'm saying this, I don't know why, but I do want you to know, if you are in an abusive relationship, whether that's at work, whether that's in a romantic relationship, whatever kind of relationship that is, if somebody is misusing their power and they are limiting your options, I want you to know they don't have the power to do that. They can attach consequences to the choices you make, but they cannot limit your choices. Does that make sense? Having the freedom to pursue other options, understanding that it could be yes, and yes, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to have that. Yes, I'm going to do a job that I love, and I'm going to do it for money that I think is appropriate, and I'm going to do it for hours that I think are awesome. Yes, and. But sometimes when people are giving us these false choices, they want to tell us that we cannot do what we want, or else they'll attach a negative consequence to it. That's theirs to do. And we talked about boundaries before, right? We cannot expect to choose without consequences, but we always have the choice. We have to decide, are the consequences worth it? And I'm here to tell you that if somebody's presenting you with a false choice, be suspect and make sure that you identify the options you have within that scenario. The or else that some people would love to put on your life, your boss, your boyfriend, other people in your life that want to control you, whether it's for your best, they think, or because they're just misguided on what's good for people. I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart that those kind of ultimatums, that presenting false choices to you, limiting your options in a deceptive way, they don't have your best at heart. All right. The third thing is beware of the absolutes. Beware of the absolutes. I will never be able to be an entrepreneur. I will never have my own business. People always hate it when fill in the blank. Always and never. There's so few times when those are actually true. When you hear yourself saying, I could never be a nurse, I'm too old. Those are absolutes that are not true. And those are false choices, false limitations that you're placing on yourself. Be suspicious when somebody else puts them on you and tries to limit your choices. Be a little suspicious when you're doing it to yourself. And when you hear yourself saying always or never, those are some of your red flags. Those are some of your red flags. Beware of the absolutes. This always happens for me. It never works out well. It didn't before, but maybe it will now. What do we need to do differently? And again, that's where the coaching questions are so helpful, because sometimes we're in the picture. We can't see the frame. We don't know. We can't always see what's around us. All we know is what we see, what we've done, what we've experienced. Having a person who genuinely is looking out for us and our best, what we want, looking out for our real best without an ulterior motive is so valuable. It's so valuable. So just know that you can be your own coach by asking yourself, so what if it could happen? You say, oh, you know what? I could never get a job doing what I love. It just would never pay enough. Well, what if it could? What would it look like? What could it be like? Start exercising your creative juices instead of giving yourself the no before you even get started. It could never work. There just are no jobs like that. Okay. I use that example because so many of my clients say that there just aren't any jobs like that. Really? Let's talk about that a little bit more. How do you know? What if there were? What would they look like? I've had people tell me, I don't have any skills. They'll never hire me. I don't have any skills. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Always and never. Always and never. Those are the terms that should just raise the hackles up on the back of your neck. Like, okay, got to take a look at that, because always and never are putting false limitations on your options. Once in a while, there's a real never, there's a real always, but they're not nearly as frequent as what we tell ourselves when we are trying to keep ourselves from exercising our freedom to choose. It's all about our freedom to choose. It's so seldom either or. Start using those terms. Yes, and yes, it's a hard job market. Yes, it's a tough job market. And I am motivated and highly skilled, right? So let me welcome a few of you. So Philip, we already said hi. You were the first one to in tonight, and so glad to see you. And here's Carol. Hi, Rachel. Thank you, and giving a shout out in the comments. Mary, it's good to see you here. And Rachel says this. Rachel says the no before we even get started is the most common wall I come up against. Not knowing what exists is the majority of the battle. And then how do we find out? How do we find out? Rachel, you've got it so right. The no before we even get started prevents us from even exploring what if. I love I love the options that technology gives us. I love it. 30 years ago, when I was looking for options of careers, I could not just go to careers.com. I couldn't just go to Google and type in um, the things that I like to do and have something pop up. Uh, it didn't exist. But now we can actually go, that we have technological tools that will help us to find information that we never had access to before. It's a beautiful thing. And not knowing what exists sometimes lulls us into this idea that because we don't know it exists, that it doesn't, right? Because I don't know about it, it must not exist. That's almost never the case. There's so much out there. I was just so intrigued uh, as I was exploring ways to help people deal with the impending death of a loved one. I'm passionate about that, and the four principles that Thrive in Change is based on: bring the honor, uh, respect the now, trust the process, and find the beauty. Those had their origins in my experience of being with my sister as she walked through the valley of having to decide to disconnect her husband from life support. It Those principles were crystallized under very, very intense circumstances. And I know that they're valuable when people are in situations like that. And so, as I was exploring, gosh, how could I use these principles in that way? I'm doing some Google searches, and what pops up? This idea of a death doula. Like a death doula. Well, a birth doula helps a woman as she's preparing to have a baby. A death doula helps the people who are preparing to die. What an interesting concept. I would have never known that that even existed, that that was a thing without technology. But when I saw it, my heart just leapt. Wow, I'm so glad that's out there. That exists. There's just been so many things that technology has connected me with that I would have never believed possible. And I'm here to tell you, hi Zippy. I'm here to tell you, if you wonder, Google it. Just put in a bunch of search words, something that's connected with what you're trying to find out more about. Explore it. Just because you're exploring something doesn't mean you're going to do it. We sometimes assume a no without even pursuing what options we might have, because we're afraid that if we find an option we like, we'll do it. Uh-oh, that's a whole different Sunday Night Live, you guys. Sometimes we intentionally don't want to know the options because we don't want to make a change because we're scared, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. So as we wrap up, oh, Philip says this, it would be great if I was computer savvy, or should I say iPhone savvy? Well, you know what? You can learn the same way as each one of us, right, Philip? One little thing at a time, one little step a day, one little effort a day makes amazing progress. That consistent, I'm going to try it today. I'm going to try something new, one thing at a time, and get some help. Get some help. Ask somebody you know, maybe somebody at church, somebody at your job. See if there's somebody that can show you how to go to Google, because we have the capacity to learn and grow. And the more we learn and grow, the more tools we have to be able to impact the world for good, to achieve the dreams that God's put in our heart, the purpose that He's called us to. It's amazing stuff. Ah, good job, Phil. Good. I'm glad you are learning. There are things that we don't have to be perfect, like we don't have to be the best at. We just need to be good enough to be able to find out the information we need, right? Philip, I'm glad that you're pursuing your options. You're not just sitting there twiddling your thumbs and saying, I can't, I don't know anything about the computer. I'll never be able to look up anything. I'm glad you're taking some steps to grow in your skills, and that confidence is going to come with it. So Carol says, our learning curve exemplifies as we use the processes you have taught us on Sunday Night Live, and it changes our lives and those around us. It absolutely does. As we use principles that are healthy and good, they actually change us from the inside out. I agree, Carol. It changes our lives and those around us. Saturday morning, Carol says, Mastermind with you stretches our minds and we continue to grow so our decisions get better and better as we move forward. Thank you for all your teaching, single or group. It is my pleasure. Carol, what you're describing, I almost was going to talk about tonight, and it's the ratchet that if we are continuing to grow in our capacity, grow in our knowledge, grow in our understanding, and we continue to grow, the decisions we make get better and better and better and better, right? It's a ratchet, but it's a good ratchet. And the other side of that coin is when we refuse to grow, when we refuse to learn, like Philip says, you know what? I want to be computer savvy. I want to be iPhone savvy. You're learning, Philip. That's a positive ratchet. The more you learn, the better the more able you will be to use those tools, and they're going to help inform the other decisions you make. And the flip side of that is when we twiddle our thumbs, tell ourselves we can't, instead of growing, we're shrinking, and the decisions we make get I was going to use some really harsh language. I was going to say stupider and stupider. They get less and less good. They get less and less wise, and they start bringing reduced results, and we start shrinking, and we decide ourselves into a trap. Um, that what you're talking about, Carol, learning and growing, applying principles like we learn here or learn in our Saturday morning women's mastermind group. When we apply those principles, we are expanding, and the decisions we make as we are growing and expanding are better and better, so that our lives continue to get better and better instead of shrinking and shrinking. All right, you guys, thank you for hanging with me tonight. Thank you for leaning in. Thank you for being willing to explore your options. It is so seldom either or. There is a wide range of options that you have in front of you, but you have to make sure you believe that it's possible. You have to refuse to accept somebody else's false choices, and you have to make sure that you are not thinking in absolutes that create your own false choices, that you trap yourself. With that, I love you. Have a blessed week, and I will see you again soon. Bye.